When my 5-year-old daughter needed life-saving surgery, my parents looked me straight in the eyes and said, "She's not worth it. Let her suffer." At that moment, I felt something inside me break, but I had no idea that one day those very words would come back to haunt them. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Luna. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how my own parents betrayed me at the darkest hour of my life. Growing up, I was always the child who faded into the background. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden boy, the pride of the family. No matter what he did, no matter how many times he failed or made mistakes, my parents found a way to excuse him. Me, I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need attention. That's what they told me anyway. And for years, I believed it. Even after I became a mother, I tried to hold on to some hope that things would change, that maybe seeing me raise my daughter would soften them. My little girl, Lily, was bright and full of life. She had the kind of laugh that could fill a room and the gentlest heart I'd ever known. But when she was 5, everything came crashing down. It started with her fainting during playtime. I thought maybe she was just tired, but the doctor's face told me otherwise. After a whirlwind of tests, I sat across from the pediatric cardiologist who delivered the words no parent ever wants to hear: "Your daughter has a rare heart condition. She needs surgery soon or she won't make it." The cost of the surgery was staggering, nearly $150,000. I felt the air leave my lungs when I saw the number. As a single mom, working paycheck to paycheck, I couldn't imagine how I'd ever come up with that kind of money. But then I thought of my parents. They weren't billionaires, but they were comfortable. They had savings, investments, and a house nearly paid off. They had helped Daniel more times than I could count. Surely, when it came to saving their granddaughter, they would step up. I went to their house one evening, my heart pounding. I sat across from them in the living room, Lily coloring quietly in the corner. I explained everything: the diagnosis, the surgery, the costs. My voice cracked as I pleaded, "Please, she needs this. I just need some help to get her through it." My mother looked at me, her expression colder than I'd ever seen it. She set down her teacup and said flatly, "She's not worth it. Why would we throw that kind of money at a child who might not survive anyway?" I blinked, sure I had misheard. "What did you just say?" My father leaned back in his chair, his tone just as cruel. "Luna, you have to be realistic. It's a waste of money. Even if she makes it, what kind of life will she have? We're not funding this." I felt my stomach twist, nausea rising in my throat. I couldn't understand how they could say that about their own granddaughter. About my little girl. I stammered, "She's your flesh and blood. She's only 5. How could you?" But my mother cut me off with a shrug. "We can't save everyone, Luna. You need to accept it." That night, I left their house with tears streaming down my face, clutching Lily's tiny hand. I told myself maybe they were just in shock, maybe they'd change their minds. I wanted to believe that somewhere, deep down, they still cared. But a few days later, my cousin let something slip that made my blood run cold. My parents had given $200,000 to Daniel. Not for anything noble. Not to save a life. They gave it to him to bail him out of gambling debts and to fund some ridiculous business idea he was bragging about. I confronted them, my voice shaking with rage. "You told me my daughter wasn't worth saving, but you handed Daniel $200,000 to throw away." My mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Daniel has potential. He'll turn his life around. That's an investment." An investment. Meanwhile, my little girl was fighting for her life. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All those years of being the afterthought, the one who didn't matter, came flooding back. I remembered every time they ignored me, every time they made excuses for Daniel's failures while holding me to impossible standards. And now, when I needed them most, they proved what I had always feared: to them, I had never really mattered. I sat outside the hospital later that night, staring at the surgery estimate again, my hands trembling. Lily was asleep in the back seat, her chest rising and falling with fragile breaths. I looked at her, and the weight of everything crashed down on me. If they wouldn't fight for her, then I would. I whispered to myself, "We're on our own, baby girl. But I promise you I'll find a way." And that was the moment I knew. Whatever it took, however hard it would be, I was going to save her. My parents might have turned their backs on us, but I wasn't about to let their cruelty decide my daughter's fate. I had no idea how, but deep down, I made a vow: one day, they would regret every single word they said to me. That night was the turning point. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was the beginning of something else entirely, the beginning of a fight that would change our lives forever. After that night outside the hospital, I stopped wasting tears on my parents. I realized they had made their choice, and it wasn't me or my daughter. It was Daniel, as always. But while they were busy coddling him, I was fighting for Lily's life. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with bills scattered across the surface. My savings weren't even close to what I needed. I had maybe $3,000 tucked away, and the surgery estimate felt like a mountain towering over me. For a few minutes, I just sat there with my head in my hands, fighting the panic clawing up my throat. But when I looked over at Lily, sitting in her pajamas and drawing with her crayons, I knew I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. I picked up my phone and started making calls. Banks, charities, medical loan companies, anyone who might listen. Most of them shut me down politely. A few weren't so polite. One man actually laughed and said, "Lady, if you don't have collateral, forget about it." I bit my tongue and hung up, but deep down, I felt like screaming. Still, I wasn't giving up. I picked up extra shifts at the diner where I worked nights. I started cleaning houses on weekends. I babysat for neighbors. Every spare dollar went into a jar I labeled Lily's heart. It was slow, painfully slow, but every time I dropped a crumpled bill into that jar, I felt a little flicker of hope. Then one of my coworkers suggested I start a crowdfunding page. At first, I hesitated. Asking strangers for help felt humiliating. But then I remembered my parents' words, "She's not worth it." That burned in my chest, and I thought, fine, if they won't see her worth, maybe the world will. I wrote our story late into the night, pouring every ounce of my heart into it. I posted pictures of Lily's smiling face and explained the diagnosis, the costs, everything. I hit publish and prayed someone would care. The response shocked me. Within a few days, donations began trickling in. $5 here, $20 there. Strangers left messages like, "Praying for Lily and stay strong, Mama." I cried reading those words. People I had never met saw more value in my daughter than her own grandparents did. It was humbling and heartbreaking at the same time. But life wasn't suddenly easy. I was exhausted all the time. I worked double shifts, came home to care for Lily, then stayed up at night answering messages on the fundraiser. There were moments I thought I couldn't keep going. Once, after a 12-hour shift, I came home to find Lily asleep on the couch with her coloring book beside her. I knelt down and kissed her forehead, whispering, "We're going to make it, baby. I promise." Weeks passed. Slowly, the donations grew. 10,000, then 20. I was still far from the total, but I was moving forward. Then, just when I started to believe we might actually make it, something happened that nearly shattered me. One afternoon, I went to the grocery store and ran into my mother. I hadn't seen her since that night at their house. She looked me up and down like I was something she scraped off her shoe. She said, "Still begging strangers on the internet? Pathetic, Luna. If you had married better, you wouldn't be in this mess." I felt my face flush hot. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to tell her how vile she was. But Lily was holding my hand, and I refused to let my mother's poison touch her. So instead, I smiled tightly and said, "Funny, Mom. Because those strangers are doing more for your granddaughter than you ever did." Her face twisted, but I walked away before she could say another word. My hands were shaking on the cart, but in my heart, I knew I had just drawn a line in the sand. Not long after that, something incredible happened. A local news station picked up our story. They came to the hospital to interview us. I was nervous, but I spoke from my heart about Lily's bravery and how grateful we were for every single donation. The clip went viral online, and overnight, the fundraiser skyrocketed. Donations poured in from all over the country. Within a week, we had reached a full goal. I sat on the floor of my living room the night I saw the number tick past 150,000. I sobbed, ugly, heaving sobs, clutching Lily to my chest. "We did it, baby girl. We really did it." The day of the surgery came. I signed the forms with trembling hands, kissed Lily's forehead, and handed her to the nurses. Those hours in the waiting room were the longest of my life. I sat alone, because of course, my parents didn't come. They had other things to do. Daniel was off somewhere, probably blowing the money they had given him. But then the surgeon came out, his mask pulled down, and I'll never forget his words, "She's going to be okay." I collapsed into the chair, my whole body shaking with relief. Lily had made it. My little girl had survived. That night, as I sat by her hospital bed, listening to the steady beep of the monitors, I made myself a promise. I whispered into the dark, "One day, Lily, they'll regret what they did to us. I don't know when or how, but I'll make sure of it." I didn't know then that the chance would come sooner than I expected, and in a way so poetic that even I couldn't have imagined it. Years passed and life slowly began to feel normal again. Lily grew stronger every day after the surgery. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She joined dance classes, made friends at school, and filled our home with laughter. Every milestone felt like a victory I had clawed out of the universe with my bare hands. Meanwhile, I rebuilt myself too. The crowdfunding page had connected me with people I never expected, supporters who shared resources, mentors who encouraged me, and even one kind woman who offered to teach me the basics of running an online business. I started small, selling handmade crafts and later branching into digital designs. To my surprise, the business took off. Within a few years, it became profitable enough for me to leave the diner behind. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scraping by. I was thriving alongside my daughter. And as Lily and I built our life, Daniel's world was unraveling. Word spread through the family grapevine his business ideas had failed one after another. The money my parents gave him? Gone, wasted on gambling, luxury cars, and nights out with people who disappeared as soon as his pockets emptied. By the time he was 35, Daniel was drowning in debt. At first, my parents bailed him out again and again, but eventually their resources started to dry up. Their investments tanked, medical bills piled up, and the beautiful home they once boasted about became a financial burden they couldn't manage. They were too proud to admit it, of course, but I could see the cracks forming from a distance. I hadn't spoken to them in years. They didn't call to ask about Lily, not once. But then one afternoon I got a message from my aunt. "Your parents are in trouble. They might lose the house." I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tight with a mix of emotions. Once upon a time, I might have felt pity, but I remembered that night in their living room, my mother's cold words, "She's not worth it." And suddenly, pity wasn't part of the equation. I met with a lawyer and discovered something I hadn't expected. The house my parents lived in was still partially tied to my late grandparents' estate, and as their granddaughter, I had legal standing in what happened next. I could either let the bank take it, or I could buy it out myself. The decision wasn't hard. When the foreclosure went through, I was the one who showed up at the auction. I signed the papers with steady hands, my heart pounding. I bought the house outright, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl begging for help. I was the woman holding the power. A week later, I showed up at my parents' doorstep. They were shocked to see me standing there. My mother opened the door, her face pale. "Luna, what are you doing here?" I held up the deed with their address printed across the top. "I own this house now." My father appeared behind her, his face twisted in disbelief. "What do you mean you own it? That's our house." I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Not anymore." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, I saw fear in their expressions. They weren't the untouchable authority figures of my childhood anymore. They were just two people who had gambled away their security and lost. My mother tried to recover her composure. "You wouldn't kick us out. We're your parents." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Parents? The ones who told me my daughter wasn't worth saving? The ones who gave Daniel $200,000 while I worked myself to the bone just to keep Lily alive? "You're lucky I'm even standing here talking to you," they begged then. My father's voice cracked as he said, "Please, Luna, don't do this. We have nowhere else to go." I should have walked away. A part of me wanted to. But then I looked past them into the house I had spent my childhood in, where I had been made to feel small and unwanted. And I thought of Lily, running through these halls, filling them with the kind of joy this place had never seen. That's when I realized my revenge wasn't about throwing them out. It was about making them live with the consequences of what they'd done. So I let them stay, but not on their terms. "I'll allow you to live here," I said calmly, "but this is my house now. You'll live under my rules and you'll see Lily every single day. And every time you look at her, you'll be reminded that you once told me she wasn't worth saving." My mother's lips trembled, but she didn't argue. My father hung his head in silence. For the first time, they had no power over me. The weeks that followed were almost surreal. They were quiet, subdued, careful around me and Lily. It was as if they were walking on eggshells, terrified I'd change my mind and throw them out. And Lily, sweet, forgiving Lily, treated them with a kindness they didn't deserve. She ran through the halls, giggling, showing them her drawings, her dance moves, her whole beautiful life. Every time I watched her, I felt a wave of pride. They had said she wasn't worth it. But here she was, thriving in the very house they once tried to deny her. And now they were forced to see her value every single day. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch my mother watching Lily with tears in her eyes. Maybe she regretted what she'd said. Maybe she didn't. I didn't care. Because the truth was, they couldn't escape it anymore. Karma had done what I couldn't. It had turned their cruelty into their punishment. And me? I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the one who had survived, who had risen, who had built a life worth living. That was my revenge. Not screaming, not throwing them out on the street, but making them live with the knowledge that the little girl they dismissed was the one who saved them and that they would never, ever be able to undo what they had done. And that's why I can say with a smile they told me my daughter wasn't worth it, but in the end, she was the one who made everything worth it.